At my grandson's wedding, they seated me with the waiters. Not by mistake, not because the family table was full. My name is Walter Atwood. I'm 71, and I am that boy's only living grandfather. And someone made very sure my name wasn't on a single chair in that room. I could have caused a scene. Part of me wanted to. Instead, I sat down at that little table by the kitchen door, folded my hands and stayed quiet, the way I'd stayed quiet for 7 long years. I want to be honest with you. I almost walked out before the toasts. If I had, I'd have died never knowing my grandson had been looking for me all week, never knowing the phone number they gave him wasn't mine, never knowing what was really inside the envelope in my coat pocket, the one that made a room of 300 people go completely silent an hour later. Before I take you there, please take a moment to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and your local time. Now let me take you back to the afternoon I stopped mistaking my silence for love. I got to the hall an hour early. I always do. Ruth used to say, a man who's late is a man who doesn't respect the people waiting on him, and I've carried that with me long after I lost her. My suit was pressed. I'd ironed it myself that morning at the kitchen table, the way she taught me. Gray wool, a little old in the shoulders, but clean. The reception hall glittered. White linens, tall candles, flowers I couldn't name, spilling off every surface. There was a seating chart near the entrance, printed in gold on a big easel. I put on my reading glasses and started looking for my name. Atwood. A-T. I ran my finger down the columns twice. It wasn't there. I found the family table up near the head of the room, close to the stage. Vivian's parents, Vivian's sisters, Gerald's people. Every chair had a little card with a name in curling script. None of them said Walter. A young woman in a black vest came by with a tray. She saw me squinting at the chart and stopped. "Can I help you find your seat, sir?" "Atwood," I said. "Walter Atwood. I'm the grandfather." Something flickered across her face. She checked a folded paper in her apron. "You're at table 14, sir. Right this way." Table 14 sat against the far wall, pushed up beside the swinging kitchen door. Every time a waiter came through the door, knocked the back of the empty chair beside mine. I thanked her. It wasn't her fault where they'd put me. I sat. I folded my hands, and when I looked up across that whole shining room, I found Vivian watching me from the family table. She smiled. That smile told me everything. It wasn't cruel on the surface. It never was with Vivian. It was patient, satisfied. The smile of a woman watching a plan finish exactly the way she drew it up. I turned my eyes to my water glass and let the noise of the room wash over me. 7 years. That's how long it had been since my son Thomas died. And 7 years is how long I'd been disappearing. It started small, a birthday I heard about after it happened, a Thanksgiving where the date kept changing until it landed on a day I couldn't make. Every time I called, Vivian answered, warm as honey. "Oh, Walter, you should have called first," she'd say, every single time. I remember driving 4 hours to Daniel's 12th birthday, a wrapped gift on the passenger seat, only to stand on the porch while she told me it wasn't a good day. The boy was tired. Maybe next time. I drove 4 hours home with the cake going soft in its box. Ruth would have marched right past her. Ruth never met a locked door she respected. But Ruth was gone by then, and I was alone, and I was afraid, because Vivian held the only thing I had left. After Thomas, she was Daniel's mother, and mothers decide who gets to be in a boy's life. I knew if I pushed too hard, she'd close the door for good. So I swallowed it. I told myself patience was love. I told myself a good grandfather waits. I told myself a lot of things at that kitchen-side table, watching a wedding I'd been erased from. What I didn't yet know was how much the boy at the front of the room had been told about me. Let me tell you about Daniel so you understand what I was protecting. When he was small, before all of this, he was mine on Sundays. Thomas would drop him at my workshop, and the boy would climb onto the stool by my bench and watch me work. Sawdust in his hair. That serious little frown when he tried to sand a board smooth. I taught him to build a box before he was 7. Dovetail joints, no nails. He got a splinter the size of a matchstick and didn't cry, just held it up to me like a prize. He called me Pop. We fished the creek behind my house in summer. He'd talk the whole time and scare off every fish in the county, and I never once told him to hush. I'd have sat there listening to that boy talk until the sun went down and the stars came up. When Thomas got sick, fast and cruel, it was Daniel who held my hand at the hospital. He was 12. He looked up at me in that hallway and said, "We still have each other, Pop. We still have each other." That's the thing I was trying to keep. That's why I bit my tongue for 7 years. Every insult I swallowed, every door that closed. I told myself it was worth it if I could stay in the boy's life even a little. I would have crawled over broken glass to keep that promise we made in the hospital hallway. So I sat at table 14 in my pressed gray suit, and I did not make a scene, because making a scene was the one thing that might cost me him. But somewhere in this room, my grandson was wondering why his pop had abandoned him. There were 2 things I carried into that hall that afternoon, though I didn't understand yet how much they'd matter. The first was something from Thomas. Before he passed, my son set up a fund for Daniel's future. College, a first house, whatever the boy needed. Thomas asked me to be on the paperwork with him, a second name on the account, a safeguard. "You're the only one I trust with this, Dad," he told me from his hospital bed. I signed everything the lawyers put in front of me. Then Thomas died and grief swallowed the years, and I let the details slip out of my hands. The second thing was smaller, a wooden box no bigger than a loaf of bread that I'd built years back and carried in my coat that day out of pure sentiment. I'd made a full-size one for Daniel when he was a boy, carved his name into the lid, and I'd told him, "You open this when you need to know the truth about your family." I don't know why I brought the little one. Maybe I hoped I'd get a minute alone with him. Sitting there, a thought surfaced that I'd been pushing down for a long time. I hadn't seen a statement on that fund in years. 2, maybe 3. Every time I'd asked Vivian, she had an answer ready. "The bank changed their whole system, Walter. It's all online now. Don't worry yourself." Don't worry yourself. She said that to me a lot. I sat at table 14 and tried to remember the last time I'd actually seen a number on that account. An actual balance in black ink. I couldn't. And for the first time in a long time, that not knowing felt less like carelessness and more like a locked door. I should tell you about Vivian, because I don't want you thinking she was a cartoon. She grew up with nothing. She told me once, early on before the walls went up, about a childhood of secondhand coats and free lunch tickets, and other kids knowing exactly which they were. She hated it. Not the poverty itself, but the being seen as poor, the looking down. So she built a life where no one would ever look down on her again. A big house on a hill, the right clothes, the right friends, the right table at the right restaurant. And a certain kind of family portrait, the kind where everyone matches and everyone smiles and nothing is out of place. I was out of place. A retired carpenter with sawdust under his nails and a truck older than her marriage. I didn't fit the picture she'd spent her whole life framing. Gerald, her second husband, moved to her rhythm. A pleasant, hollow man who agreed with whatever she said last. When she decided a thing, Gerald decided it too, a beat behind, like an echo. For years I told myself Vivian was just frightened. Frightened of ending up back where she started, back in the second-hand coat. I told myself the coldness wasn't hatred, just fear wearing a nice dress. For years that was enough for me. I made excuses for her the way you'd make excuses for a scared animal that bites. Watching her at the head table, laughing with her sisters, glancing at me by the kitchen door, I felt the old excuse rise up out of habit, but it didn't quite land this time. Something had shifted, and I couldn't name it yet. Then a young man in a good suit peeled away from the wedding party and started walking straight toward table 14. I recognized him. Marcus. Daniel's best friend since they were boys in Little League, the best man today by the look of the boutonniere on his lapel. He'd grown into a tall, easy young man with a lawyer's careful eyes. "Mr. Atwood," he said, and he sounded surprised. "Why are you sitting all the way back here?" "This is where they put me," I said. I kept my voice light. "It's fine, son. Good view of the cake." He didn't laugh. He looked at the empty chairs around me at the kitchen door swinging behind my shoulder, and then he glanced across the room toward the head table, toward Vivian. Something hardened in his jaw. "Daniel's been looking for you all week," Marcus said. I blinked at him. "Looking for me?" "He's been trying to reach you, calling." texting the number he had. Marcus crouched down beside my chair so we were eye to eye. He said you never answered. He thought... He stopped himself. Thought what? He thought you didn't want to come. I felt something cold move through my chest. My phone had been quiet all week, quiet all month. Quiet, I'd assume, because a busy young man getting married doesn't think to call his old grandfather. Marcus, I said carefully, I haven't gotten a single call, not one message. He held my eyes for a long moment, then he pulled his own phone out of his jacket and started scrolling, his thumb moving fast. That's not possible, he said quietly. He's got a number saved for you. He showed it to me himself. Read it to me, I said. He read the number out loud. It wasn't mine. It had never been mine. The number Marcus read had my area code. The first 3 digits after that were mine. Then it changed the last 4 digits, belonging to a stranger or to no one at all. Somebody had given my grandson a number that looked like mine, but wasn't. For years, every call Daniel made to his pop had rung into empty air. Every text had gone to a phone that wasn't in my hand. And every silence he got back, he'd read as me not caring. Who gave him this number? I asked. My voice didn't sound like mine. Marcus straightened up slowly. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. We both turned our heads the same direction, toward the head table, toward the woman in the champagne-colored dress, laughing behind her hand. Mr. Atwood, Marcus said low and urgent. There's a lot Daniel's been trying to figure out. He found some things. Old photos. He's got questions nobody will answer straight. What kind of questions? Before he could answer, someone called his name from the wedding party, the photographer waving him back for pictures. Marcus stood torn. Don't leave, he said to me. Please. Whatever they told you, whatever you're about to hear up there, he nodded at the microphone stand near the stage. Just don't leave that chair. Then he was gone, swallowed back into the crowd. I sat with my hands flat on the white tablecloth, my heart going hard. 7 years, I'd told myself the silence was mine to keep, that patience was love, that a good grandfather waits. But nobody had told Daniel I was waiting. I pulled out my own phone, my hands not quite steady, and I saw them. 3 messages, from an unknown number, sent 2 weeks ago. I opened the first one. The first message was long. Daniel must have found my real number somewhere, an old letter, an emergency contact form. I'll never know. He'd sent it 2 weeks before his wedding, and it had sat unseen in a folder my old phone dumped strangers into. I read it twice to make sure I understood. He asked why I'd stopped wanting to see him. He asked if he'd done something wrong as a kid. He said his mother had told him over the years that his pop had grown bitter after Thomas died, that I blamed the family, that I'd refused to help pay for his college when he asked, that I hadn't shown up to his high school graduation because I couldn't be bothered. I read that line 3 times. Refused to pay for his school. I was never asked, not once, not by anyone. Skipped his graduation. I never received an invitation. I found out it had happened from a Christmas card weeks later, a photo of him in a cap and gown I hadn't been told about. There was a whole version of me living inside my grandson's head, a cold, bitter old man who'd turned his back on a grieving boy, a man who'd chosen money and grudges over his own blood. That man wasn't me. That man had never existed. But Daniel had grown up beside him, believing every word. The second message was shorter. Just, if you don't want to come to the wedding, that's okay. I just wanted to invite you myself this time, not through Mom. Not through Mom. Even at 28, some part of him had started to suspect. Some part of him had gone around her to reach me directly. My hands were shaking now. I opened the third message. The third message was a single line sent the night before the wedding. I hope you come, Pop. There's a seat for you at the family table. I put it there myself. I read it, and I looked up at the family table, where there was no seat for me, no card with my name, and I understood that someone had removed the chair my grandson had set aside with his own hands. I stood up. I don't remember deciding to. My body just did it. 7 years of sitting still, finally reaching its end. I left table 14 and started across that shining room toward the front, toward the boy I'd taught to build a box without nails. Gerald cut me off before I got halfway. He came out of the crowd, smooth and smiling, one hand raised, and put himself gently in my path. Walter, he said, warm as anything. Good to see you. Let the boy enjoy his day, huh? Big day. A lot of eyes on him. I'd like to talk to my grandson, I said. Course you would. After the toasts, maybe. Don't want to pull him away from his guests right now. His hand landed light on my arm, steering. You know how these things are. Don't make a scene, Walter. I looked down at his hand on my sleeve. Then I looked up at his pleasant, hollow face. I'm not making a scene, Gerald, I said. My voice was quiet and even. I'm finding my grandson. I stepped around him. I heard him say my name once more, a little sharper, but I didn't stop. Across the room I could see Daniel now in his tuxedo, laughing with a cluster of friends, so tall, so grown, so much like Thomas that my chest ached. And in my coat pocket, another weight I'd nearly forgotten. The weight in my coat was an envelope, and to explain it, I have to back up 1 week. Something had been gnawing at me for months. That fund of Thomas's, the statements I never saw, the way Vivian's answer was always so smooth, so ready. Don't worry yourself, Walter. The bank changed their system. A week before the wedding, I couldn't sit with it anymore. I drove to the bank downtown, the same branch where Thomas and I had signed the papers all those years ago. I still had my copy of the trust documents in a shoebox in my closet. My name was right there, beside my son's, a co-trustee, which meant I had every legal right to ask what I asked. I sat across from a young banker, and I said, I'd like a full statement on this account, every transaction since it opened. She typed. She frowned a little at her screen. She printed a stack of pages, slid them into an envelope, and handed it to me across the desk. Here you are, Mr. Atwood. I meant to read it that night. I did, but my eyes aren't what they were, and the columns were long, and some cowardly part of me wasn't ready to see whatever was in there. So I set it on my kitchen table, and it sat there for a week, and this morning I picked it up and put it in my coat pocket without quite knowing why. Maybe I always knew I'd need it. Now I was crossing a wedding hall with that envelope against my chest, moving toward my grandson, and toward the woman who'd spent 7 years telling him lies. I didn't know yet exactly what those pages held, but I was about to find out, and so was everyone else in that room. I didn't reach Daniel. Before I could, a spoon rang against a glass, and the whole room turned toward the head table. Vivian was on her feet, microphone in hand, radiant. The crowd hushed. I stopped where I stood, halfway across the floor, caught in the open. I just want to say a few words about my son, she began, and her voice caught prettily. About the family that raised this wonderful young man. Applause rippled. She let it settle. Raising Daniel wasn't always easy, she said. There were hard years. Years where some people, who should have been there for him, simply weren't. The room went quieter. I felt it before I understood it. A shift. Heads beginning subtly to turn. Family is the people who show up, Vivian went on, warm and sorrowful. Not the ones who make excuses, not the ones who can't be bothered. Some people just couldn't be bothered to be part of Daniel's life. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. Because she'd seated me by the kitchen door in full view of 300 people, and now every one of them followed the shape of her words back to the old man, standing alone in the middle of the floor in a pressed gray suit. I felt the heat climb my neck. I saw pity on some faces, on others, judgment. There he is, the one she means, the grandfather who couldn't be bothered. 7 years of her whispers, and here was the public version, delivered with a catch in her throat and a glass of champagne raised high. To family, Vivian said, the ones who stay. Glasses lifted around the room. I stood there, exposed, my son's envelope burning against my chest, and I felt something in me that I hadn't felt in a very long time. The old instinct rose up first. Leave. Walk out the door, quietly get in the truck, drive home and let them have their party. That's what I'd done my whole life. Absorb it, swallow it, keep the peace. I actually turned toward the exit. My feet started moving, and my hand in my coat pocket closed around the small wooden box I'd carried in. I'd made it late at night the same design as the big one I gave Daniel. Dovetailed corners, no nails, sanded smooth as glass. My thumb found the joint where two pieces of oak locked together without a single fastener holding them. Just precision. Just two things fitted so true they couldn't come apart. I stopped walking. I thought about Ruth, about the last real conversation we had before the cancer took her voice. She'd caught me letting a man at the hardware store shortchange me rather than make a fuss, and she'd taken my face in both her hands. "Dignity isn't silence, Walter," she'd said. "Sometimes it's the loudest thing in the room." Dignity isn't silence. I'd spent 7 years confusing the two, telling myself that biting my tongue was the noble thing, the loving thing, that a good man endures. But there's a difference between patience and surrender, between keeping the peace and letting someone bury you alive one shovelful at a time. Daniel thought I'd abandoned him. My son's fund had vanished into silence. And this woman was standing in front of 300 people, using my grandfather's grief as a prop. I turned back around. I did not walk to the door. My heart was pounding, but my hands had gone still steady as they get at the workbench. And I looked across that room and found my grandson's face in the crowd. Let me step out of the story for just one moment. I sat there holding that little wooden box, and I want to be honest with you. For one moment, I almost walked out the way I always had. If you've ever swallowed your own worth just to keep the peace with people who never offered you any, you already know that chair. You've sat in it. Do me a favor, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe, because what my grandson did next still gives me chills. Now back to that wedding hall. Vivian sat down to applause. The band started up soft, the moment passed, and the room turned back to itself. And I was left standing there like a fence post until Marcus appeared at my elbow and steered me gently toward the wall. "You okay, Mr. Atwood?" "I've been better," I said. He guided me to the edge of the room, away from the crowd, and lowered his voice. "I need to tell you some things fast before the toasts finish." He glanced around. "Daniel's been questioning all of it for about a year now. The whole story he grew up with. It started coming apart." "How?" "Little things at first. He'd repeat something his mom told him about you, and it wouldn't line up. Dates that didn't work. A story where you supposedly refused to visit him in the hospital, except he remembered you being there. He remembered your hands." Marcus almost smiled. He said, "Marcus, I remember my pop's hands. A man who abandoned me doesn't have hands I remember." Something cracked open in my chest. "Then he found the photographs," Marcus went on. "A whole box of them in the attic his mom said didn't exist. You and him, fishing, in your workshop, you teaching him something at a bench. Years of pictures of a grandfather his mother swore had walked away. She told him I didn't exist in those years. She told him a lot of things." Marcus's jaw tightened. "And then about a month ago he found something else. Something in his dad's old files." "What did he find?" Marcus looked at me, and for the first time his careful lawyer's eyes went soft with something like dread. "He found the trust papers, Mr. Atwood," he said. "He knows about the money. He knows about the money." I pulled the envelope from my coat with fingers that had gone cold. "Marcus, stay here a second." I opened it right there against the wall. The pages I've been too afraid to read for a week. My eyes are slow, but numbers I can read. Thomas made sure I was good with numbers. The account opened the year Thomas died. A solid sum. My son had put aside everything he could for his boy's future. Then the withdrawals started. Not all at once. That would have been too obvious. A few thousand here, a few thousand there. Spread across 6 years, patient and steady, the way water wears down stone. A tuition payment that never went to any school. A disbursement here, a transfer there, and every dollar that left that account landed in the same place. One receiving account listed again and again down the page. An account in the name of Vivian Croft Rayner. The fund Thomas built for his son's college, his first home, his future, was nearly empty. Drained down to almost nothing, one careful withdrawal at a time, into his mother's private account. I stood against that wall in my pressed gray suit, and I felt the floor tilt. Daniel had asked me in his message why I refused to pay for his college. He never knew there was money. His own father had left him a future, and it had been spent out from under him, and then the blame for his empty pockets had been hung around my neck. "Mr. Atwood," Marcus said. "What is it?" I turned the pages so he could see the columns, the same name over and over in the receiving field. "Does Daniel know how much is gone?" I asked. Does he know where it went? He knows some of it, Marcus said. He found the papers. He doesn't have the full numbers. That's why he wanted you here. He thought maybe you could explain. Before I could answer, the crowd parted. Daniel came through it. He'd seen us against the wall, and he crossed the whole room to get to me, tuxedo and all, ignoring the guests who reached for his sleeve. He stopped in front of me, and for a second neither of us said anything. He was taller than his father had been. He had Thomas's eyes exactly. Then he did something that undid me. He knelt down right there on the ballroom floor, so we were eye to eye the way we used to be when he was small, and I was crouched at his level in the workshop. "Pop," he said. His voice was thick. "Why did you never answer me?" I called. I texted. "For years He stopped. "Why did you stop wanting me?" And I understood in that moment that this boy had carried the same wound I had. He thought I'd left him. I thought he'd forgotten me. And someone had stood between us the whole time, making sure we each believed the worst. "I answered every time, son," I said. My voice barely worked. "Every call, every letter, they just never let you hear it." His face changed. Something breaking and rebuilding at once. "The number you had for me was wrong, Daniel. It was never mine. And the letters I sent, I thought of the box at home, full of them returned or never delivered. You never got them, did you?" "What letters?" he whispered. Across the room I saw Vivian rise from the head table. She'd spotted us, and she was coming. She crossed the floor fast for a woman in heels, her smile fixed in place, her eyes hard as glass. "Danny, sweetheart." She reached us and put a hand on his shoulder, light and possessive. "Get up off the floor, you'll ruin the tux. Come on, the toasts are about to start." Daniel didn't move. "Your grandfather is confused, honey," she said, lowering her voice to that tender, worried register she'd perfected. "He's an old man. He gets things mixed up. Let's not do this today, of all days." "I'm not confused, Vivian," I said quietly. She didn't look at me. She kept her eyes on her son, working him the way she'd worked him his whole life. "Daniel, please, people are watching. Let's talk about all this later as a family, in private, not here." "You've been saying later for 7 years," I said. Her head turned then, just to me, and for 1 second, with Daniel still kneeling and the band still playing, I saw the real face under the pretty one. Cold, calculating, furious that the thing she'd buried was clawing its way up in front of her guests. "You're embarrassing yourself, Walter," she said, low, just for me, "in front of everyone. Is this what you want? To ruin his wedding? To be the bitter old man who caused a scene? Because that's the story they'll remember." It was a good threat. A week ago, it might have worked. "You're right," I said. "They'll remember a story. I'd just like it to be the true one for once." Daniel got to his feet, slowly. He looked at his mother, and then he did something I don't think she'd ever seen him do. He stepped between us, facing her. "Mom," he said, "sit down." The word landed like a dropped plate. A few nearby guests turned. The band played on, but the tables closest to us had gone quiet. Vivian laughed light and disbelieving. "Excuse me?" "Sit down," Daniel said again. He wasn't shouting, that was the thing. His voice was low and steady, and it carried more for being quiet. "I've been trying to talk to my grandfather for a year, and every time something got in the way. His number was wrong, his letters never came. He wasn't invited to things I know he'd have come to." He shook his head slowly. I kept telling myself I was imagining it, that my own mother wouldn't do that. "Daniel, this is not the—" "You seated him by the kitchen," Daniel said. "I put his card at the family table. I checked it that morning. And when I looked tonight, it was gone, and he was back there by the door." Vivian's mouth opened, closed. The guests weren't pretending not to listen anymore. I watched my grandson's face, and I watched something in it settle a decision he'd been circling for a year, finally landing on solid ground. "I found Dad's files," he said to her. "I found the trust. I've been afraid to ask you about it because I didn't want it to be true. But Pop's standing right here with an envelope in his hand, and I think I finally want to know what's in it." He turned to me. "Do you have it? The whole account?" I held up the envelope. And that was when Marcus, who'd stepped away without my noticing, came back into the circle with a microphone in his hand, the one from the stage, the band trailing off behind him. Actually, Marcus said, and his voice filled the room, before the toasts, there's something everyone here should hear. 300 faces turned toward us at once. The band had stopped. The clatter of forks, the hum of 100 conversations, all of it drained out of the room until the only sound was the soft electric hum of the microphone in Marcus's hand. Vivian stood frozen between her son and me. I watched the color leave her face in real time, watched her calculate and come up empty. She'd spent 7 years controlling the story in private, one whisper at a time, one blocked call at a time. Private was where she won. Private was her whole kingdom. Marcus had just knocked down every wall. "Marcus," she said, and her voice had a thin new edge of panic. "This is a wedding. Whatever you think you're doing." "I'm the best man," Marcus said simply. "This is my toast." Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. I set the envelope down on the nearest table, flat in plain view, my son's account laid open in black and white. Daniel stood beside me. On his other side, his new wife had risen from her chair, watching one hand pressed to her mouth. I looked around that room at the faces. I didn't know. Vivian's sisters, her parents, her friends from the country club, all the people she'd built her perfect picture for. They were leaning in now. They could feel it, the way you feel the air change before a storm. Gerald had gone very still by the bar. And my grandson stood tall in his tuxedo, my son's eyes in his face, waiting, finally, to hear the truth about his own family. The whole hall went quiet, and Marcus looked straight at Vivian. "A year ago," he began, "my best friend asked me to help him find his grandfather, the one he was told had abandoned him." Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. In that silence, calm carried farther than shouting ever could. "Most of you know Daniel. His whole life," he said, turning slowly so the room could hear. "You know he's a good man. What you might not know is the story he grew up with, that his grandfather, his dad's father, turned cold after Daniel's father died, that the old man blamed the family, refused to help, skipped his graduation, couldn't be bothered." Heads nodded here and there. They'd heard it too. Vivian had been thorough. "Daniel believed that story for years," Marcus went on, "until it started falling apart in his hands. A number that was supposedly his grandfather's that never connected. Photos his mother said didn't exist, of a grandfather who was there for every birthday, every fishing trip, every Sunday, until one day he just wasn't allowed to be anymore. The room had stopped breathing. So Daniel asked me to help him find the truth. And it turns out the truth was standing at table 14 tonight, by the kitchen door." Marcus looked at me. "Mr. Atwood." "Would you stand up, sir?" I was already standing, but I understood what he meant. I straightened my old gray jacket and I stepped forward into the center of the room, into the light, where for 7 years I had not been allowed to stand. 300 people looked at the man who couldn't be bothered. An old carpenter in a pressed suit, hands folded back straight. "This is Walter Atwood," Marcus said, "Daniel's grandfather. And I think it's time everyone heard what he's actually been doing for the last 7 years, instead of what he was accused of." He handed me the microphone. I hadn't planned to speak, but my grandson was watching, so I began. "I'm not much for speeches," I said. My voice shook, then steadied. "I build things. I'm better with my hands than my words." A few people almost smiled, so I'll keep this simple. 7 years ago, I lost my son. And after that, I slowly lost my grandson too, and I let it happen because I was afraid that if I fought, I'd lose him completely. That was my mistake. I was quiet when I should have spoken. I looked at Daniel. "You asked why I never answered. Son, I did. Every call. And when the calls stopped connecting, I wrote. Every birthday, every Christmas. 7 years of letters." Daniel's face crumpled. "I never got any letters. I know that now." I reached into my coat and took out the small wooden box. I held it up. "You remember the box I made you when you were a boy? Dovetail joints, no nails. I told you to open it when you needed the truth about your family." He nodded, unable to speak. "I made this one to match, and I filled it with copies of every letter you never received." I opened the lid and turned it so he could see, so the front tables could see the folded pages packed tight inside each one, dated, each one addressed to a boy who never read them. The gasp went through the room like wind through wheat. I heard someone at Vivian's family table say low, "She told us he never even called." I took one letter out, unfolded it, and read the top line aloud. "Dear Daniel, you turned 16 today. I drove past your school just to feel closer. I hope someday you'll let your old pop back in." Daniel put his hand over his mouth, and behind him, Vivian took a step backward. I set the box down and picked up the envelope. "There's one more thing," I said, "and then I'll sit down and let these young people get married. This part isn't about feelings. This part is just numbers." I looked at Daniel. "Your father set up a fund for you before he died. For college. For your first house. For your future. He put my name on it too, so I could help protect it." "Son, did you know that money existed?" "No," Daniel said. "I paid for school myself. Loans. I was told there was nothing." "There was something," I said. "There was a great deal." I held up the bank statement. My hand was steady now. "This is the full account history. Every dollar your father put in, and every dollar that came out." I let that sit. "The money didn't go to your school, Daniel. It went out slowly over 6 years, a few thousand at a time, into one private account." I read the name off the page plainly, without heat. Vivian Croft Rayner. The room made a sound I'd never heard before. 300 people inhaling at once. "That's a lie," Vivian said, but her voice had lost its music. "That's Walter. You don't understand the finances. You're twisting." "I'm not twisting anything," I said. "These are the bank's own records. Anyone here who doubts it is welcome to read them." I laid the pages on the table, open in the light. Vivian's eyes darted around the room, and I watched her reach for the only tool she had left. "I did it for this family," she cried, and the tears came right on cue. "You have no idea what it costs to give a child a good life. I sacrificed everything." "You spent his future," I said quietly, "and blamed me for the empty pocket." The tears stopped working. I watched them fail her in real time. She looked around for a sympathetic face and found guests staring at their plates, staring at her, staring at the pages on the table. Her own sister looked away. "Vivian," I said, and I didn't say it cruelly. "I want you to know that. I'd waited 7 years, and I found I had no appetite for cruelty now that the moment was here. I didn't come here to ruin this day. I came because my grandson invited me. You did the rest yourself, one lie at a time." She had no answer. For the first time since I'd known her, the woman who always had an answer ready stood with her mouth open and nothing coming out. I turned away from her gently, the way you turn away from a fire that's finally burning down, and I faced Daniel. "I'm sorry, son," I said. "Not for tonight. For the 7 years before it. I should have knocked the door down. Your grandmother would have. I let my fear of losing you become the thing that lost you. That's on me, and I'll carry it." "Pop," Daniel's eyes were streaming. "You were there the whole time, in a box in the attic, in letters I never got. You never left." "I never left," I said, "and I'm not leaving now." And then 7 years too late, my grandson put his arms around me in front of 300 people, and I held on to him the way I'd wanted to since the day at the hospital when he told me we still had each other. Over his shoulder, I saw Gerald slip quietly out a side door, not looking back. The kingdom Vivian had built on secrets had just lost every one of its walls. For a moment, nobody knew what to do. A wedding isn't built to hold a thing like that. The band stood uncertain with their instruments half raised. The photographer had lowered her camera. Then slowly the room began to move. Daniel's new wife came to me first. She took my hand in both of hers. "I'm so glad you're here," she said. "Daniel's talked about you. The real you. He never believed the other version, not all the way down." Behind her, an older man I didn't know, one of Vivian's uncles, stepped forward and shook my hand hard. "She told us you'd gone bitter," he said gruffly. "Told us you didn't want anything to do with the boy. All these years." He shook his head. "I'm ashamed I believed it." One by one they came, not everyone, but enough. People who'd been fed the story for years coming now to look the real man in the eye. A few of them drifted toward Vivian instead, and I saw the hard conversations starting at the edges of the room, the questions she wouldn't be able to smile her way out of. Vivian stood alone in the middle of her perfect reception, in the perfect dress beside the perfect flowers, and watched her guests choose. The silence around her grew wider with every passing minute. She'd spent her whole life terrified of being looked down on. Now the whole room was looking, and there was nowhere left to hide the woman underneath. She caught my eye once across that widening space. I didn't gloat. I just held her gaze steady and then let it go. I'd wanted this for 7 years, or thought I had. Standing in it, I felt no triumph, only a quiet, aching relief, and underneath it something that surprised me, something close to pity. She found me later out in the hallway, where I'd stepped to catch my breath. The party had restarted behind us, subdued Daniel doing his best to give his guests a wedding after all. Vivian came around the corner, and the mask was gone. She looked older without it, smaller. "Are you happy now?" she said. "You humiliated me, in front of everyone I know." "I told the truth," I said. "You're the one who decided it was humiliating." "You have no idea what my life was." Her voice shook, and this time I don't think it was performance. "You have no idea what it's like to come from nothing, to claw your way up and spend every day terrified you'll slide back down. I gave that boy everything." "You gave him a lie," I said, "and you took his father's money to do it." She flinched. "I'm not going to stand here and pretend I understand you, Vivian. Maybe you were scared. Maybe some of it started as fear. But somewhere along the way, fear stopped being your excuse and started being your weapon." She said nothing. "Here's what happens now," I said. My voice was even. There was no cruelty left in me, but there was no bending either. "The trust is going to be looked at properly, by people whose job it is. You'll answer for what's on those pages in the right way, through the right doors." "He's my son," she whispered. "You can't take him from me." I looked at her a long moment. "I never wanted to," I said. "You'll always be Daniel's mother. That's yours forever. But you will never again decide whether I'm his grandfather. That part's over." I turned to go back inside. "Walter," she said behind me. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. "I don't know what to do now," she said. "That's not my answer to give," I told her. "It's Daniel's now, all of it." I went back inside and found my grandson at the edge of the dance floor, watching the guests. A man learning in one night that half of what he knew about his family was built on sand. He saw me and came over. "I don't know what to feel," he admitted. "She's my mom, Pop. She raised me, and she did all of that." "Both those things are true," I said. "That's the hard part. She's not a monster. She's a person who did monstrous things because she was afraid. You're allowed to grieve her and hold her accountable at the same time." "What do I do about her?" I put my hand on his shoulder the way I used to when he was small. "You don't have to decide tonight, and you don't have to decide it my way. She's your mother. Whatever you choose, less contact, careful contact, time apart to think, I'll stand beside you for it. But son, listen to me." I made him meet my eyes. "Don't let this turn you hard. Don't spend the next 7 years angry the way I spent them silent. Neither one gets you your life back." He nodded slowly. "How do I make sure she can't do this again? To me, to my kids someday?" "Boundaries," I said, "not revenge. You decide what she gets access to, and you hold the line calm and clear every time. That's how you win this, not by hurting her, by refusing to let her hurt you anymore." He was quiet a while. The band played something soft. "Will you dance with my wife?" he finally said, half a laugh breaking through. "She's been dying to meet the grandfather who apparently builds furniture." I laughed. First time all night. That was 3 years ago now. A lot has changed since the night I sat by the kitchen door. The trust got sorted out the right way. Lawyers, records of formal accounting. It was slow, and it wasn't pretty, but the truth held up, because the truth usually does when you lay it out in the open and let people look. A good portion of what was taken made its way back to where Thomas meant it to go. Daniel used some of it to put a down payment on a little house with a workshop out back. He asked me to help him build the workbench. We did it together over 3 Sundays, dovetail joints, no nails. And when it was done, he ran his hand along the top and got quiet. and I knew he was thinking about the box, and about his father, and about all the Sundays we'd lost. "We've got them back now, Pop," he said, "the Sundays." "We do. Every week, Daniel and his wife come by, or I go to them. There's a grandchild coming in the spring, my great-grandchild, and I've already started building the crib. Vivian and Daniel talk sometimes." Carefully, on his terms, with his boundaries, the way we talked about. She's not out of his life completely, but she's not running it anymore either. She sends cards, he reads them. It's not warm, but it's honest. And honest is more than they had before. I don't hate her. I want you to know that. Hating her would mean giving her more of my life, and I've given that family enough of my silence already. I spent 7 years believing that keeping the peace was the same as keeping my grandson. It wasn't. It never was. The letters found their way home, too. The night of the wedding, I gave Daniel the box. The real one. The copies I'd kept of every letter he never received. He took it home, and over the following weeks he read them all, one at a time in order. 7 years of birthdays and Christmases and ordinary Tuesdays when I just wanted to say I was thinking of him. He called me after each one, some nights, just to talk about it. "You went to my baseball game," he said, once wonder in his voice. "You were in the parking lot. You wrote that you didn't want to make trouble by coming in, so you just listened from the fence." "I heard you got a hit," I said. "You wrote that too." He was quiet. "I always thought you didn't care, and you were standing at the fence." The box sits on his mantle now. His wife put it there. When people come over and ask about it, Daniel tells them the whole story, the real one, from the fence to table 14 to the microphone. He says he wants his own kids to know it. He says he wants them to know that the quiet ones, the ones who get pushed to the back tables, are sometimes the ones who loved you most all along. From the parking lot, from the fence, from the seat by the kitchen door. I think about Ruth a lot these days, about what she said with her hands on my face. Dignity isn't silence. Sometimes it's the loudest thing in the room. It took me 7 years and one terrible wedding to learn she was right, but I learned it, and I've got the Sundays back to prove it. There's just one more thing I want to leave you with. Last week, I finished the crib for my great-grandchild. Oak like everything I love. Dovetail joints, no nails. 2 pieces of wood fitted so true they'll hold 100 years without a single fastener. I carved a name into the headboard, the name Daniel and his wife picked. And under it, small, where only family will ever find it, I carved 4 words. You were always wanted. Because that's the thing I know now. Sitting in my workshop with the sawdust and the evening light, they gave me the worst seat in the room that day. The table by the kitchen, by the swinging door, out of every photograph. Turned out it had the best view of the truth. I got to watch the whole room see it all at once. I got my grandson back. I got my Sundays. And I got to learn late, but not too late, that your worth is not something other people hand you at the door. It's something you carry in yourself and set down on the table and refuse to let anyone spend but you. If Walter's story meant something to you, do me one kindness. Tell me in the comments about a time you finally stood up for your own worth. Someone reading needs to hear it tonight. And if you believe dignity beats revenge every single time, hit subscribe and watch the next story. I've linked in the description. It's about a mother who was told she'd never be welcome at her own daughter's table. You will not believe how that one ends. Thank you for sitting with an old carpenter and his story. Take care of the quiet ones in your life. They may be loving you from the fence.